This is a Falcon BMS 4.32 tutorial on the basics of package fragging, pre-briefing for flight, and finally a little bit of campaign management. So I want to start off with the real basics. So you can see I've got a campaign loaded up in front of me, and when you load up a campaign, whether you start or you're loading a saved game, this is always the first page you're going to see, the priorities page. I personally don't mess with this very much because I don't care, but for those who think, they look at the screen and they don't know what's going on here, I'm just going to explain it very quickly. So you have these three sub-tabs, the target type, mission type, and packs. And these are basically telling the AI what kind of targets it's going to hit, what kind of mission types it's going to use to hit those targets, and what areas it's going to prioritize in sending out those missions. So as you can see in the target types, you have a wide array here. You can basically choose, do you want the AI to be attacking enemy aircraft or enemy ground troops or whatever. At this point, I probably really want to bump the aircraft because you can see I have a lot of bandits in the air and a lot of identified enemy flights that we just shouldn't have right on top of our troops. So I might drag this slider up here and try and get them to kill some more aircraft. The mission type is basically, how is it going to get those aircraft? So if I'm turning up aircraft here, do I want them to be using offensive counter-air to go destroy their air bases and maybe like bomb their runways and whatever? Or do I want them to have defensive counter-air down here and maybe less offensive counter-air so that we're just protecting our ground forces? And finally, we have packs, and these are the areas where the AI is going to be scheduling flights. And obviously, darker red is high, white is low, and there's a lot of gradients in between. And you can basically click any of these areas and slide the slider around, and it'll change its priority. And of course, if you don't want to do any of these things, you can just leave it on set by HQ, which is what I typically do, and hit OK. So now that we're in this screen, you can see there's a fair number of map markers already, but there's actually a lot that aren't being shown. So I want to start by pulling up a few more map markers. So you can right-click anywhere on the map, and it'll bring up this little menu. And what I'm going to do is start turning on some installations. So by default, only airfields are on. But I'm going to turn on air defenses, army, command, control and communications, logistics, war production, and other. So as you can see, there's a little bit more stuff here, and some of these icons are actually pretty important. So I'm just going to explain what a few of them are. So right here, these icons are surface-to-air missile sites. They may or may not have a surface-to-air missile battery located at them. But they are prime sites for surface-to-air missile battalions to go and set up shop. These little, they look like a little building with 4 windows and a big smokestack next to it. Those are factories and power plants and the like, various things related to production. This is an early warning radar site. So that's basically a big old search radar that's going to be able to see you from a couple hundred nautical miles away, depending on the terrain. Down here we have an army base, and that'll typically have a depot at it, and that'll be the target there. In addition, we have, this is a naval base right here. And so those are the air defense installations and the CCC installations. What I'm going to show you now, and actually all of the industrial installations are also the factory, as opposed to there's no other thing for industrial, they're all just factories. So the thing I'm going to show you now is like the special other ones. So over here we have a nuclear site, the Vinca Nuclear Research Center, and then there are these depots, which are they're just ammo storage sites and the like. So those are going to be basically everything you'll find on the ground for static sites. One thing to note is if you're ever looking at a site and you don't really know what it is, there's a couple ways you can find out information about it. The first is you can just right-click and then turn on names. So as you can see now, if you zoom in, this says thermoelectric power plant, Niksik Army Base, and then you can go into the order of battle if it's an army base and look it up. However, there are also some other better ways. So if you find the icon you're looking for and you want to know more about it, you can just right-click on it and hit in status. And this will tell you what's at that target if it's a static target. Then you can hit recon down here. and you can actually see the target, look at the buildings, all that good stuff. And you can do exactly the same thing for air units and ground units. So that's 3 handy ways that you can find out about any target you're looking at. Number 1, turn on names. Number 2, right-click and hit recon. And actually, number 2 is right-click and hit status. That's the easiest, and it'll give you information the quickest. And then right-click and hit recon, and that'll show you the actual 3D images of whatever you're looking at. So now I'm going to turn on some more ground units, and I'm going to turn off names here because you see it gets a little cluttered. So in ground units, you want to make sure that you've turned everything on to battalions, and you want to check air defense at a minimum, and support is also a pretty handy one to check. So on the left now, you can see a complete list of what the ground unit symbols mean, but I'm just going to go over the most important ones, and that is air defense battalions. So this little half moon crescent type thing is an air defense battalion, and it's crucial that you understand that an air defense battalion can either be AAA or SAMs, and it's not marked, so you're going to have to actually go to their status and find out. As you can see here, this is a battalion that has SA3s, and so basically the way you're going to tell that it's a SAM battalion and not a AAA battalion is you're going to look for the actual vehicles in this list down here that indicate that it is a SAM battalion. So that'll be, you know, if you see SA anything, SA 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, that means that you're looking at some sort of surface air missile battalion. Infantry battalions will have a couple SA7s, maybe even SA14s, but those are shorter range missiles, and a lot of other battalions also have SA13s. Don't worry about those. What you're looking for are the big kind of 5, SA2s, 3s, 4s, 5s, and 6s. And you might see an SA10 rarely in some theaters. So the next thing you need to know when you're looking at these is, are they a threat to you or your flight? And the way you tell that out is, way you find that out is if you're looking at it and you see their radar. So for the SA3, it's a low blow, and as you can see, their radar is not currently with the unit. It can be replaced, but at this point it's been destroyed. So this battalion, even though it has missile launchers, doesn't have a radar to actually track aircraft, and therefore it can't shoot them. So that's a very good thing to note, is that when you're seeing an air defense battalion and you're not sure if it's a SAM or not, just look it up. As you can see, this is an SA3 battalion with an active low blow, so this would tell you that it is a threat if you fly, you know, within the SA3's threat radius. So you're looking for either the SA2's fan song, the SA3's low blow, the SA4's long track, the SA5's bar lock, or the SA6's straight flush. And if they don't have those in their unit, they're not going to engage you unless there is a fairly low chance that, especially if you give them a lot of time, if you frag your flight like 4 hours in advance, there's a chance that they could recover and get a new radar by then. But for the most part, if you don't see them with a radar, they're not a threat to you. So I'm not really going to talk about the rest of the ground units. You can basically figure them out on your own. But basically, you can see where the flot is here. And you can see that there's a lot of red units here along the flot. There's a couple marked back here way behind the flot. But for the most part, theater dependent, of course, you're not going to see all of the enemy's units. That's because you can only see units that you've recently had some sort of reconnaissance activity on, whether it's, friendly planes flying over, or there's a J-STARS that's surveying the battlefield, whatever that is. You have to have some sort of reconnaissance asset that's seen them in a reasonable amount of time. So if a plane flies over, a friendly Blue 4 plane flies over a Op 4 battalion and spots it, then it'll stay on the map for an hour or two in game time, and then it'll disappear again unless someone else flies over it again. So when you're seeing these giant gaps and empty spaces, don't immediately assume that those are safe places to go. Those are just places where you don't know what's there. And even if you're seeing some units in an area like this, there could be other units there that you just don't know about. So there's a lot of fog of war here, and don't assume that this map is telling you everything that you need to know. So now I'm just going to talk about the basics of fragging. How do you, turn what this map looks like into a frag for your flight? And so one important thing to note here is if you're flying a squadron that you want to frag all the flights for, that you do not want the AI to be fragging any flights for, you can turn off AI fragging. I'm going to show you how to do that right now. So you have to go to the order of battle or find your squadron in some other way, and you want to click status. So I'm going to change it for the 510th Fighter Squadron because I've already changed it for my own triple nickel squadron. And you'll bring up this Fighter Squadron page. So it'll give you, the name and all this information, which isn't really that helpful. And really what we're concerned with is right down here at the bottom, this set by HQ. If you just uncheck that and you X out, that'll set it to no longer, as long as it's not green, you've turned off AI fragging. And so now the AI is just going to let you frag flights there. I've already done that with my triple nickel, as I said before, and there are no flights in my frag order because of that. So I'm just going to show you how to frag a flight really quick and easy here, and we're just going to choose kind of an arbitrary target. So let's say I want to attack, this is a BM-21 Rocket Artillery Battalion, and this is some sort of tactical missile battalion. So I'm going to go set up a CAS, pre-planned CAS package against them. So I right-clicked and I clicked Add Package, and it brings up this Add Package page, and then I just hit New under the Flights window. It gives me this Add Flight window over here. So one thing to note is it's just going to come up with kind of like the top things on the list, and it's random here. So you have to go find the aircraft you fly in order to properly frag. If you don't know what aircraft you're flying, which block of F-16 or whatever it is that you're flying, you can just look through the list and choose other blocks and look in this drop down for the squadrons until you see your squadron name. The triple nickel flies the F-16C Block 40, so I'm going to choose that. I'm going to ensure that my squadron is properly selected here. And now I'm going to change my role. And I'm just going to talk quickly about roles here. There's a huge list of these, and if you look at the PDF that's attached to this video, I have a very in-depth explanation, but I'm just going to go over the most common roles available. So what we're going to be doing now is a CAS mission, close air support, and that means we're attacking enemy ground units that are near friendly ground units. So there's some chance that we're going to see friendly ground units mixed in with these enemy ground units, and we're going to have to not kill the friendlies while we kill the enemy. The second very common mission is strikes. A strike is hitting any sort of fixed target, and that could be right at the front lines. That could be 500 miles behind the front lines. Another air-to-air mission is combat air patrol, which is CAP. And as you can see, there's a bunch of CAPs up here. They're explained fully in the PDF. I won't go into them. But basically, they are where you're going to be flying in basically a pattern in a certain area to protect some asset of your Air Force, or sometimes your ground forces. The final thing I'm going to talk about is SEAD, suppression of enemy air defenses. So there's SEAD strikes and SEAD escorts, and those are attacking enemy surface-to-air missiles or AAA battalions. And typically, those are very common towards the beginning of the war because you're trying to knock out all of the enemy's EWR capabilities and all their missiles and AAA so that you can fly freely. And the final one I guess I'll talk about is OCA, offensive counter-air, and that's basically bombing enemy airfields so that they can't send up their fighters to attack your strike fighters, and so that you don't have to worry about being intercepted anymore or having your friendly forces bombed or whatever it is. Basically, the point is to keep them from deploying their air force. As I said, there's a complete description in the PDF, and I thoroughly recommend that you check it out because it covers all the missions that you might be choosing. But I'm just going to choose a CAS mission here, and I'm going to go back here. See, we've got pre-planned CAS. That's the role we want. I'm just going to put a 2-ship flight in here, and I'm just going to ensure that the target's right, and I'm not really going to worry about the rest. I'm assuming that I'm flying this as a full human flight. If you're letting AI fly this flight, this skill level does matter, but I'm not going to worry about that. So you hit OK, and a lot of times you'll get this window, unable to do this, bad timing. So you're just going to hit OK. This isn't actually a problem. The problem that the AI is having in fragging this flight is that there's not really enough time between takeoff and the time on target to figure everything out. So you just need to give the AI a little bit more time, and you do this by just making sure you have the hour selected here, and then you're hitting this right arrow once or twice. And you just want to try and frag the exact same flight. So go back, hit new again, Come back to this window, make sure everything's the same. Looks to me like it is. So now we're going to frag it and see it frag just fine. And now what we want to do is we're actually going to roll back that time to get the time we actually want to be at. So I'm going to go and you just hit the locks to change which one you're working on. I'm going to roll this back about an hour and a half to 9 o'clock. And as you can see, so now this is at 9 o'clock. I could even roll it back to 8:50. That's not an unreasonable time. And the only thing you have to worry about here is if you roll it back to within 2 minutes of your current time, the computer that's running the frag order won't let you modify it anymore, because it once your flight is within 2 minutes of takeoff, it's assumed to be in the air already, because it's already had to roll out of its hangar or hardened shelter and get moving towards the runway. So you can't do anything to change it once you've moved within 2 minutes of the current time or earlier. So if you accidentally frag this at like 8 a.m., then, well, first of all, it's probably end up really messed up and end up aborted. But second of all, you won't be able to change anything about it. And you won't be able to change the takeoff time. You just have to cancel it out and start over. So that, if you just hit OK now, you've fragged the flight. Now you could just go to your pre-planned cast, jump in, and go blow up some missile battalions. But what I want to talk about is actually a little bit more complicated, and it's fragging a full package. So I'm just actually going to go and delete this flight. There we go. So as you can see, that's how you delete a flight. You just go into the ATO. You have to find the proper section, which it'll be under. And then if you find your package, you just right-click on it and hit delete. You can also hit show flights, and that'll let you add more to the package. But I'm just going to start fragging from the beginning. So I actually want to try a little bit of a more challenging target. So I'm going to say let's attack Banja Luka Air Base out here. And this is a pretty complex target. It's far in the enemy rear. It's pretty well protected. Obviously, there's a lot of enemy between us and it. So it's a pretty complex task. And also, we need a lot of redundancy to make sure we eliminate this airbase. But the nice thing is that this airbase is a pretty important airbase for the enemy, so it's worth our time and effort. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to preempt what I had to do earlier, and I'm just going to roll this time on target forward a little bit to give the AI time to frag flights. And then I'm going to start fragging just like I was before. So most of the time, if you choose your target, it'll bring up the roll selection properly. You just want to double check that. You set the proper size, and then you're pretty much done. As long as the target looks right, and you're on the right squadron, and your roll is correct, you can just frag that. And then you want to roll the takeoff time back here so that the rest of your flights end up on the same takeoff time. And now I'm going to add some other flights to help protect this deep strike flight. So the first thing I want to do is add a seed flight. So the seed flight really has two jobs. Its primary mission is to suppress enemy air defenses en route and at the target. But it also has the mission of, once it's suppressed those air defenses, of performing a bit of counter air. Or at least that's typically how we run things at UO. If you have enough people that you can also run an escort flight, that's great. But sometimes you really do use the seed as both the seed escort and the standard escort. So I'm gonna frag this seed escort right now. And there's something you need to do with seed and regular escort flights, which is you need to make sure the target name is changed to whatever the flight that they're escorting is. So in this case, we're looking for Cowboy 2. So we're just going to double check that we have the right roll and the right target, and it should frag all right, and there we go. So the next thing I want to do is also I want to frag, and that's basically the same thing as a seed escort. Just got to make sure you have escort, and we're going to go back and choose Cowboy 2 again. And there we go. So now we have a 10-ship package right here that are going to go attack Banja Luka Air Base. But there are also, you can add fighters outside, fighters, bombers, whatever type of aircraft you want that are not part of your squadron. And I'll show you how to do that. The only thing that's different is you're going to choose different aircraft. So I'm going to choose some F-15Cs as more escorts since there's a lot of enemy aircraft in the air. So I'm going to put them on escort. I'm going to put their target once again as Cowboy 2. And as you can see, this thing unable to do this, no aircraft available. This is really very, very common if you don't tell the AI that you want to frag other air wings. And the reason that is because as soon as an aircraft becomes available, the AI is going to try and frag it into a flight. So you have to plan ahead. You have to turn off fragging for certain other flights, certain other squadrons, and only then will you really be able to frag outside of your own squadron. You need to make sure you're turning off the AI, basically. But I do have a squadron that I've turned the AI off for, and I'm going to frag a pair of EA-6B Prowlers. So these have a little bit of a special thing in that they can do electronic warfare. So I'm going to put them on electronic countermeasures, and I guess I can frag a whole flight of 4 of them. And we're just going to make sure that the target looks right. So in this case, they're not an escort, so their target is going to be an area rather than an actual flight. So as you can see, that fragged the rest of the Prowler squadron. There's actually only 3 of them left, which is why I'd only fragged 3 of them instead of 4. I'm going to show you now a little bit more about Steerpoints and waypoints and all that. But basically, once you're fragging, once you have like a list like this, you're basically done. The only important thing is understanding the roles of each part of the package and understanding exactly how they all fit together. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that as I get through this part on Steerpoints. But at this point, we can just frag this whole flight. Press OK. So as you can see, we now have, I'm looking at the EA-6B's flight plan right now. But I'm actually going to go back and look at my own squadron's flight plans. So they're going to be very similar because they're all launching from the same point, and they're all recovering to the same point and hitting the same target. So they're all identical, except some of them have a little bit different waypoints. As you can see here, the AI will automatically frag these flights so that they're in a logical order. And by logical order, I mean that flights are arriving in a good order on target so that you're going to be able to, first of all, protect the deep strike properly. You're going to be able to clear the area of enemy air defenses before they get there so that they can actually go in and bomb the target. The way you interact with Steerpoints is you just left-click on them, and it'll bring up this Steerpoint page. So you can see it gives me the package number, it gives me the flight, and this is a drop-down which will give you the flight information for every single flight in that package. So I can just start looking at Steerpoints for any flight I want at this point, and without actually having to select them over here in the frag order. But I'm going to go back to looking at Python 2 first for this part. Eventually I'm going to show you how to deal with the whole flight at once, but I'm just going to deal with the whole package at once. I'm just going to deal with one flight for right now. So as you can see, we're going to find the target Steerpoint here. So this says target. As you can see, their time on target is 9:23. And I like to have takeoff times, as I was discussing earlier. See, they're on an 8-minute spread right now. I actually like to have them on a 5-minute spread. And also, time on target should be about within a 5-minute spread. Because the longer your time on target, the more chance the enemy has to fly a plane to you and possibly destroy your strike flight before they get in, or at least take out a few of your escorts. Basically, you want to limit your exposure to the enemy. And as you can see, I'm looking at the seed flight. Their job at Steerpoint 4 is to do seed. So that's all looking right and proper. So basically all you need to do now is take note of that 9:23 time on target, and then we're going to look at some other flights. So the escort is Shark 2 and Cowboy 2 is the deep strike. So let's look at the deep strike and see what time he's coming on target. He's coming on target 8 minutes after. So basically the spacing at takeoff is going to remain the same at the target. That could be problematic. 8 minutes of seed isn't typically necessary unless you're hitting very, very well protected target. It doesn't look like Banja Luka is that well protected, and typically you'd need a larger package for that anyhow. So let's take a look at Shark. So they're on target 5 minutes after. I'm sorry, 4 minutes after. And that's also a fairly long time. Obviously it makes sense if the deep strike is so far behind, but I would prefer to change all these times to be much closer together, and I'm going to show you how to do that. So let's use the seed escort. That's the one that we're not going to change. They're going to be our baseline. and I'm going to now show you how to change the other ones to be closer to that time on target. So let's start with the escort flight here. The first thing you need to do whenever you're changing anything in a flight plan is ensure that all of your steer points are unlocked. By that I mean you see these small locks here on the left side. You need to make sure that none of them are green. They all need to be open. So you just can scroll through real quickly. If you see green on the left side, you need to make sure you go back and open it. But once they're all green, you can just go to this time on Steerpoint line, and you can click the time just like in that first package page. You just click the part of the time that you want to change, and you use these arrows to change things back and forth. So if our desired time on target is from 9:23 to 9:28, let's get the escort flight on at 9:23:30 or maybe 9:24:30. Even you can change it to exactly 9:24 if you have a strong opinion on the matter. So I always like to unlock them after I'm done, because then you don't have to worry about running back through again, although I always do anyhow just to be safe. You really do need to make sure you unlock them, because if you try and change time on targets or time on steer point at any point in the whole flight plan, and one other time is locked, you could actually mess up the whole flight plan and end up refragging the entire flight. So it's kind of annoying, but it's just one of the limitations of this particular engine. So we've now gotten Shark 2 on time. Let's get Cowboy on time. And one thing you have to make sure, you saw I switched from a target steer point. It's going to switch to the same numbered steer point in the other flights. It's not necessarily going to switch to their target steer if you're on the current target steer. It's going to switch to their number 4 if you're on number 4. So basically the most important thing to keep in mind is that you need to keep those locks open, and you need to make sure you're double checking which steer point you're changing. So once again, we have a locked steer point. I'm just going to go through and check all of these again. So now they're all good, and we want to change this to within 5 minutes of that original 9:23. So I'm just going to roll this back to about 9:25, and actually I could even roll back to 9:24:30, and then unlock it again. And now we're going to move on to change Prowler's time on target. So Prowler's time on target, this is for the EA6Bs that I was talking about earlier. So they're a little different because they're not just going in and shooting a target and leaving. They're actually doing, as you can see in their action line here, they're jamming. And that has this field called patrol duration. So they're going to get to this waypoint. They actually have 2 target waypoints, and they're going to actually patrol between these target waypoints. And I'm actually going to change over to their flight now and show you. So if we look at their flight plan here, we have Steerpoints 4 and 5, and these are 2 target Steerpoints, and they have a patrol duration of 1 hour, which means that actually between these 2 waypoints, they're going to patrol for an hour, jamming. So what we want to do, obviously we don't want an ECM flight to be flying around in enemy territory for an hour if all they're going to be doing is sitting there while the other 3 flights fly away. We want to set them to patrol for a little more limited duration. So let's set this to 5 minutes, same way we were doing before. And we're going to have their time on target be the same time as the seed escort. So once again, we need to double check that none of these steer points are locked. And we want to make sure that, as you can see, 4 is the steer point that's actually on the target. We need to make sure that is at 9:23. Then we unlock it. And now we need to worry about takeoff times. As you can see, the Prowlers are taking off at basically 8:46. If we go back, actually we can just do this through the steer points. If we go to Cowboy 2 and we go to steer point 1, you can see he's taking off at 8:42. Python 2 is taking off at 8:42 as well, and Shark 2 is taking off at 8:42:32. So we should probably spread out Python and Shark just to get a little more separation so that everyone has time to take off. So I actually will go back through the ATO, and so I'm just going to left click on one of these flights, hit join, and it'll take me to my squadron. And so I'm going to make sure that Cowboy's taking off first. So Cow is going to be at 842. And then I'm going to have Python, which is the seed escort. They're going to take off at 843. So we're just going to go through here and make sure that none of the other steer points are locked. So they're going to take off at 843. And then Shark is going to take off at 844. Once again, we have to check and make sure that all of our steer points are unlocked. So then we probably want to change the Prowler to 845 or 844. Basically anywhere. I like to have it within 5 minutes if humans are going to be flying the flights, because I don't think people really like to sit and wait to fly into the air. Sometimes when you have an airbase that's much closer than another airbase, it just has to happen for things to work out. But since AI are going to be flying this, you could probably leave it. I would normally leave it if it's the AI who are going to fly it. But let's just change it for the sake of assuming these are human players. So once again, check the locks, make sure nothing else is locked, and we're going to change this to 844. And now we have to make sure that the time on target hasn't changed too much. And if it has, I'll show you how to make sure that it's okay. So you can see Cowboy 2 is on target at 9:23:21, Python at 9:24:27, so 1 minute later, and Shark 1 minute after that. Unfortunately, Prowler's getting on target before the seed by about 2 minutes. So what we want to do is we actually want to back up here, and we want to reduce their speed at earlier steer points to get them there slower. So I'm just going to make sure once again that everything's unlocked, and I'm going to go back to Steerpoint 3 here, and I'm going to just reduce their speed here until they are a little better time on target. So they're now about 15 seconds behind the seed flight on the target. Now, one thing is, don't take this as the way to use actual ECM flights. I'm just trying to explain to you how to set up a package that uses multiple squadrons. I'm not going to talk about ECM at all in terms of strategy or tactics. This is just explaining how patrol duration works and how to get all the flights kind of on the same page in a frag. So now we have all 4 of our flights. They're taking off within 4 minutes of each other, actually within 3 minutes of each other, and they're on the target within 3 minutes of each other. So in terms of flying with human players, that's really good. So they're also basically, at this point, you have the skills that are necessary to frag a flight for any group of human players. Next, I'd like to talk about kind of examining the threats along that flight. So right here, what you can see is obviously there's some air defense battalions very close to our flight path. Obviously there's some MiG-29 flights, which probably if you saw this many MiGs in the air and this many surface-to-air missile battalions, you might reconsider this target unless you're very good and you're flying with some very good pilots. But for the sake of not fragging a new flight, let's just continue this as an analytical exercise. So what you would do here is you would take a look at each of the threat units along your path and try and determine if you have the capability to mitigate that threat, and also you would want to mark it in order to take action against it when you are basically ingressing and egressing. So the first thing you're going to do is look at these air defense battalions and find out if they're active. This is an inactive SA-3 battalion. This is also an inactive SA-3 battalion. This is an SA-2 battalion, but it is also inactive. So this is an SA-3 battalion that's active. So one way you can find out if you really have to worry about a threat, the easiest way is to add a pre-planned threat steer point. And you do that by, once again, right-clicking, going down here, and setting pre-planned threat steer point. So you double-click on this, and you have to choose the threat. So this is an SA-3, and we're going to hit accept. To be fair, some of these are not exactly right, but they will give you a general rule. So if you put it on the battalion and it's nowhere near your flight path, you don't really have to worry about it. You might put it there in case you end up off your flight path and you need to know where it is, but as a general rule, it's not a big deal. Another thing you can do here is you want to make sure you're looking around, especially for like SA-5s, because SA-5s can lock you up at a pretty good range, maybe 40 nautical miles, and they might not mess you up, but they will force you to take evasive action, and it's nice to be able to just eliminate them and move on. Now, when we get near the target, we can see there are a lot more missile battalions here. They look like a lot more of them will have their radars because they haven't been struck by friendly seed yet. So let's start setting some pre-planned threat steer points here. And one thing is, this is something I'll talk about it when I talk about the briefing section, but this is something you will absolutely use in briefings. And this is something that flight members should be using just to maintain situational awareness while they're in the cockpit, because all of these pre-planned threat steer points show up on your HSD. So I'm just going to add another one here for this SA2. So as you can see, the SA3 does cover the main target. This SA3 is really not of any danger to us. This SA2 is covering our ingress and egress, and this SA5 up here is also going to cover quite a bit of room. And I'll show you what I mean by the SA5 being, it's quite a bit more range than it really has. So it's set to 54 nautical miles. It will only really shoot at you within about 40 nautical miles, and if you have a jammer, it's not going to hit you. It's pretty ineffective, just in general. But as you can see, that covers a huge part of our ingress, and now we're seeing a lot of these threat circles kind of in somewhat scary places. So those are probably anything that covers your flight route. You're basically going to want your seed escort to eliminate, and in fact, you might even add more seed escort at this point, just to make sure you can eliminate all the radars of these surface to air missile battalions. One thing to note here is that you can't really tell if this right here, this SA6 site, is active or not. If there might be a battalion there that you don't know about, and so you might mark it with a pre-planned threat steer point anyhow, just to be safe. And then if it doesn't show up, if there's no one manning it, then you don't have to worry about it. But then if there is someone manning it, it'll be easy enough to find. So one other thing is you need to be able to assess the threat of air bases along your route. And this is a little more complicated. It also uses pre-planned threat steer points to kind of give you a visual guide. But I'm going to just deconflict the map a little bit by turning some of these ground units off. So as you can see, there's an airbase up here. There's another one right here by this where that SA3 battalion was. There's one right here, and of course our target is one. So what you want to do is the easiest thing I find to do here is turn on names. And you want to find out the names of these airports, and you need to look them up in the order of battle. So for instance, this is Ubdina Airport. So go into the order of battle. I've got NATO turned on. I'm going to turn that off. I'm going to look at the forces of the former Republic of Yugoslavia. I'm going to go down and I'm going to find Ubdina Airport. So you can see Ubdina has a squadron of MiG-21s and a squadron of MiG-29s. So that actually makes them somewhat threatening. So what I want to do is I'm going to put down a pre-planned threat steer point. In the Balkans, it's going to be called a base defense zone. In Korea, I believe it's actually called like maybe like an air defense zone or something. But basically, it's the only one that doesn't have the name of a surface-to-air missile battery. So as you can see, this is a 30 nautical mile ring around the airbase, and that's the ring at which it will actively send up fighters, scramble fighters, to intercept you. However, you don't really have to worry about it, because this one is not in our flight path. You might want to adjust your flight path north by just dragging the steer points away from it. But otherwise, you don't really have to worry about it. However, right here we have Bahak. So we're going to take a look at Bahak. And once again, we see MiG-21s and MiG-29s. And this will actually be on our route, both our egress and our ingress. And there's a few things you could do about this. You could either add more escorts. You could add an OCA flight that flies in before your flight and bombs their runway so that they can't get up and attack you. Or you could simply try and blow past them, maintain a high rate of speed, and get past them before they can run you down. That last one is not a great plan. You should probably think about adding more escorts as opposed to trying to maintain your speed, because you're flying into dense enemy territory here. Finally, let's look at this one up here, Zagreb. So as you can see, there's nothing at Zagreb, so we can ignore that one. And really the last one we're looking at is at our target. So this is Banja Luka, and in fact I know that there's also a squadron of MiG-21s and a squadron of MiG-29s here. So I'm going to put this base defense zone down. And I'm going to turn off names so you can see this a little more clearly. But now we have a lot of overlapping red circles, and these will show up on our HSD as yellow circles, and they'll have labels in the center of them telling you what the circle means. So we have SAM sites as well as base defense zones. And you can also see how we could probably maneuver these steer points so that we're avoiding more of the base defense zones. For instance, we could push up steer points 5 and 2 so that we're actually avoiding Bahak Air Base. entirely so that we're not tripping their EWR. So this is essentially what a good pre-flight fragged flight should look like, at least on the flight commander or the package commander's screen. So he's got all his threats marked. He's actually, in fact, there's another airfield over here that I might have missed. So Slavonsky, look it up in the order of battle. There's no one there, which is good. So you just want to make sure that you have noted all the possible threats to your flight. And then when you're briefing, you want to make sure you talk about, especially the high threat ones, but you want to talk about all of them. And I'll talk about that in one more second. But what I want to talk about now is just one more complex part of fragging, which is setting up aerial refueling. So I'm going to turn off a couple more things here just to make it easier to see. Okay, so I've turned off most of the map markers now. So you can see our flight path, and you can see a lot of fighters in the air. But what I want to do now is set up an aerial refueling point that will allow our flights to avoid having to take bags or external fuel tank all the way down to our target, so that we can basically carry more ordnance. And I'll show you exactly what I mean by that. So if I go into you can see that my deep strike flight is only carrying 2 GBU-10s. And the reason it's carrying those is because it's got these wing bags that can only go on the first pylon out, which means that they can't carry their typical loadout, which would actually be these BLU 107s. So what I would like to see is these BLU 107s, and I could possibly trade for like a 300-gallon tank or something. But the better way of doing it is to practice air-to-air refueling and then be able to set up your flights so that you can just refuel in midair. So I'm just going to set up the loadout as I wanted here, which does not involve these GBU-10s. And I'm just going to leave these, I really want those BLUs, because those are how you get rid of runways. And I might maybe give the other members of the flight, GBUs or something to follow up with, but I really want those BLUs. So now I'm going to show you exactly how to go in and change your flight so that you can meet up with a tanker en route. And right here, you can see this is a KC-135. There are also KC-10s. I'm just going to talk about the Balkans theater, in which pretty much they only run KC-135s. I'm not really sure about the other theaters. So you'll have to take that on your own. If you don't know what the tankers look like in your theater, go to the ATO, show all packages, go to support, and look for these tanker packages. And then you can actually just check these boxes here, and it'll show you their flight plans. And those will be in black as opposed to white, like your own flights. So anyway, as you can see, we've got a tanker up here, and he's currently on station, and we can actually find out how long he's on station by clicking on here. So he got on station at 8:28, and he's going to be there for 5 hours, so until 13:28, which means he will definitely be there in time for our flight. So I'm going to go to my deep strike. I'm going to move once again these Steerpoints so that I'm not going through Bahak airspace. And actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to push them even further back here, so that they're near this tanker, and especially so they're near kind of the middle of his refuel loop. So I just want to go over a quick bit of tanker operations here. The tanker is going between these 2 points here, these 2 target points. It's exactly the same as I showed you with those prowlers. What's happening is there's 2 points, he's got a patrol duration, and he's flying between them for as long as that patrol duration is going on. And during that time, you can call him up. You can reference my air-to-air refueling tutorial for how to do this. But you can call him up and ask him for fuel, and he'll vector you. The AWACS will vector you in, and you'll be able to find the tanker and refuel. So what you want to do here is you have kind of 2 options. You could either just drag these Steerpoints over and then just leave the rest alone, or you can add Steerpoints. I'll show you how to just drag first, and then I'll show you how to add as well, because adding gets a bit more complicated. So if you just drag these over, you want to add some time so that you can find the tanker and your whole flight can refuel. So what I'm going to do here is I'm looking at Steerpoint 6. Actually, what I want to do really is look at Steerpoint 2, because I want to refuel on the way out first. We're also going to refuel on the way back, but First, we're going to do this. So you want to change this line right here, the action line, and you want to change it to refuel. And as you can see, that now gives you patrol duration. So that's going to give you a bunch of time at this steer point to go find the tanker and refuel. And I'm going to give 10 minutes. And then we can do the exact same thing at steer point 6. We're just going to do refuel and 10 minutes. So one thing is this will affect your time on target, obviously. And also importantly, you should definitely check, as I failed to do, you should check to make sure nothing's locked before you do that, because you can mess up the flight, as I said earlier. And now you need to do this for your whole flight. So we're going to take the seed flight, and we're also going to drag them over. And you should note that as you're doing this, as you're dragging these points, first of all the locks need to be unlocked, and or at least all but the first steer point for sure. Any steer point after the one you're dragging will definitely get changed. So if it can't be changed, it will break. And then you can just do the same thing here. Action, refuel, patrol duration of 10. So you can kind of see how this goes. For the seed escort, I'm going to show you how to actually add a steer point. So you're going to right click on a steer point, and your left click add. And the line is going to go red because it's actually going to break your steer point. But don't fear, because it's actually easy to fix. The problem is that when the AI adds steer points, it doesn't add airspeed properly. So just go through, make sure everything's unlocked here. And you need to go in, and when you find this double red boxed one, you need to, especially if it has an airspeed of 0, that's always a good indicator, you need to increase the airspeed until the red boxes go away. And preferably, take it up to the same airspeed that it should be at, 300 knots or whatever, which you can normally find by going to the next or previous steer points. So I kind of ended up right between those two. And then you can add that steer point, i.e. to replace the steer point you're moving around. And then you can change that steer point to fuel instead. Also, you could add one after. So for instance, we could add one after 1, between 1 and 2. And we could have left 2 where it was, and just moved the refueling steer point up here, which I guess I could show you. So if we have 6 here, 6 is down here, we could add, and then move 7, correct the airspeed after we check to make sure none of the rest of them are locked. So we've checked that they're all unlocked, and then we just go here, add refuel, duration of 10, and done. So one nice thing is that if you do the same thing to every part of your flight, hopefully they'll all end up at the same time on target. So we can just go back and check our times on target. So Python 2 is on at 9:23, Cowboy 2 is at 9:32, so that's good. That's our strike flight. He's on after. He's a little late, but Shark 2 is on way too late. Shark Flight cannot be on that late, so we need to fix some things with Shark Flight. So if Cowboy 2 is on, one thing is, you got to make sure that your flights are refueling properly, that you have it all set up correctly to refuel, so that you're not giving one flight more time than the others. Then we'll just go in here again and double check these steer point times. So you see me do this before, it's not very exciting. I'll skip it for now. So now you've got it set up, and you've got your tanking set up, you've got your flight plan set up so you're avoiding as many threats as possible. So now you're at briefing time. And one thing, as a flight lead, you should tell your wingmen and your other flights, if you're the package leader, what the most important targets are, what targets you're going to hit, and what brevity words you're going to use to explain that those targets have been hit. So, for instance, common at UO is to name SAM sites based on their basic position around the target, and basically you're proceeding in a logical direction by priority and classifying them as a sniper and a number. Now, this isn't a great system because sniper is actually a brevity word for something else. which is seed related. So it can be confusing with people who know real brevity words. But basically, you want to come up with a quick way of telling other people that you've attacked the target that you said you were going to attack. So for instance, going with my sniper theory, or tactic, whatever you'd call it. So for instance, the seed flight would say that we're designating the SA-5 north of the airbase as Sniper 1, the SA-2 southwest of the airbase as Sniper 2, the SA-3 on the airbase as Sniper 3, and perhaps the SA-6 and the SA-3s down here as, Snipers 4 and 5 respectively, if that's necessary. If you found maybe AAA battalions on the airstrip, or if you knew about them beforehand and you were going to pre-brief them, you might also give them code words. So that you could just say when you've eliminated them that, Sniper 2 eliminated, and then everyone would know what you mean, and you wouldn't have to explain, the exact positions of whatever you just destroyed to an entire package. So basically, when you're pre-briefing here, you want to make sure, first of all, that everyone knows what the top threats are, that they know whatever words you're using to describe them, whatever code word you have for them. And they also, a key thing is making sure that if you have a flight that's tanking or multiple flights that are tanking, know how long they have to tank so that they can maintain their carrot speeds. And also, you want to make sure that they know that other flights are coming behind them and are going to have to tank behind them, so they're going to have to be quick. And they're going to have to know how to contact the tanker. One backup is you can always contact the tanker on guard, which is kind of lame. But they also might want to know the tanker's frequency for their TACAN. And also they probably want to know that they will actually have enough fuel when they fuel up at the tanker to fly to their target, fly back to the tanker, and then fly home. And there's an easy way to tell this, and that is by using Weapons Delivery Planner, which is currently on version 3.2. So I'm going to pop out of the sim, and I'm going to show you how WDP works. So the first thing you need to do, though, is you need to save whatever your campaign is. And just really quick, you can just go and save it under whatever, and then you can load in Weapons Delivery Planner, which I'm going to show you how to do immediately. So this is Weapons Delivery Planner. It's a really handy tool created by Falcus, and it actually has a huge number of uses. I'm just going to go over a really limited use that's handy in fragging. So you need to go up here to the top left and open your campaign save. And it helps to know your package number here. You can search manually, but it's obviously quite a long list, as you can see. It's the entire air tasking order. So now you need to select your flight. Click through these couple windows that pop up, and here we are. You can see there's a lot of data here. I'm going to ignore most of this. I'm just looking at right now this min fuel in the Steerpoint section, and this tells you at each Steerpoint what the minimum amount of fuel you need to complete the mission is. And as you can see, it gives you 1,000 pounds at the refuel points, Steerpoints 2 and 6, and 1,000 pounds at your backup airfield. If your backup airfield is closer than your primary, then your primary will be the one that's 1,000 pounds of fuel, but essentially, either way, it's a little bit conservative. You have a little bit of give and take, that extra 1,000 pounds of fuel. However, if you have more than 200 pounds of fuel required at takeoff, you probably need to schedule a refuel point. As you can see here, none of these goes above 3,500 pounds, which means I could probably cut a refuel point. But you can always just change your steer points and check out the numbers. I'm going to show you what it looks like by loading the seed escort, what it looks like when you don't have enough fuel. So as you can see right here, you have almost 7,300 pounds needed at takeoff, and that gets you to 1,000 pounds at the refuel point. You might want more than that. If you're a conservative pilot, very efficient pilot, then you might not care, and you could easily make that refuel even without wing tanks. So that's pretty much all I'm going to talk about the Weapons Delivery Planner. I heartily recommend that if you're going to be fragging flights, you look more into this tool. It can tell you a lot of handy things. I particularly point to the on-station times for the tankers in the AWACS. And also you can set up a lot of these fields with handy information for actually using in flight if you have a second monitor. So now I'm going to take us back into the sim and continue talking about more in-sim operations. Another thing you can use that is not particularly helpful early in the war, but can get helpful later, is these threat circles. So ADA is Air Defense Artillery, and these are basically just threat circles around known ADA units. And these high and low is, I believe they're about 10,000 and then 20,000 feet. So radar, these are known radars. So these are low altitude radars. As you can see, if you have the fuel to fly low altitude, you can easily avoid the radar coverage of all these Serbian units. And then if we look at high altitude, this is pretty well covered because there's so many EWRs. So basically, you're not going to be able to be high and avoid radar coverage. Later in the war, sometimes you can, but it's easier to kind of turn that off early on. Another thing I want to talk about is how pre-planned threats look in-game. And so I'm just going to reset my pre-planned threats, Steerpoints, and then I'm going to take you in-game to show them to you. So I just want to show you what these actually look like in-game. So these are the threat circles. As you can see, it's kind of hard to read when they overlap. Also, I'm looking at on a giant range. So I'm at 240 miles right now. But you can clearly see SA5 up here. Up here it says SA3. This says BDZ, which stands for Base Defense Zone. Actually, this says SA2. Somewhere in there's a BDZ one. Over here, there are two BDZs overlapping. This is Bahak, and I'm forgetting, this is Ubdina. So you can see these are pretty handy. Like you really get a sense of what you were looking at on the map is now shown on your HSD. And it's very, very handy to have, especially if you are likely to fly, like we are, very close to the edge of the space defense zone. And you want to fly as close to it as possible in order to be efficient, but you also want to fly definitely outside of it, because if you fly into it, you're going to be intercepted. And especially since Bahak has MiG-29s, which are going to be very deadly against you, even with your escort. So this is just... this is what all that pre-briefing time gets you, analyzing those threats, marking them, making sure other members of your flight have marked them. The key thing to note here is these only show up if you put them there, and if you leave the mission for whatever reason, you have to reset them. So if the mission crashes, or if you get disconnected, or for whatever reason, you'll have to reset them. So, eventually we all get tired of doing that, and sometimes you only put the most important ones or whatever. But just so you know, this is what it looks like, and this is what you get out of it. It's definitely worth your while. It'll greatly increase your situational awareness, and it'll keep you alive where other people are doing stupid things like flying into base defense zones. You can also mark the FLOT. I personally don't care to do so, so I didn't explain it in this tutorial because it has no real effect on my life. If you're flying CAS, you might want to mark the FLOT sometimes, but for a deep strike mission, I typically ignore it. So I hope you found this tutorial helpful. Definitely consult the attached PDF guide that you can find in the description on YouTube. And finally, if you have any more questions, feel free to contact me at unitedoperations.net.